welcome back to the Better Man, Better Ball Player podcast. I'm your host, Trey Cobb, and I am thrilled to bring you another great episode of baseball talk that not only helps the baseball player, the ball player, but also helps the better man. And a great guest today to help us do that was Hannah Huesman. Hannah is the mental performance coach for the Philadelphia Phillies. She is also the creator of the Mental Sweat Monday. You can check it out on Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn. She used to be an adjunct professor, faculty member at John F. Kennedy University, as well as a mental performance coach for SportStrata in New York. She interned actually with the Pittsburgh Pirates under Clint Hurdle, as well as being a rehabilitation specialist for North Shore Chiropractic and Rehab, where she also did mental training with the International Junior Golf Academy. So she has a ton of experience with mental performance, helping people become even the better versions of themselves. And she is just a great voice for people wanting to get better and always trying to give strategies, which you'll hear tons of strategies, tons of nuggets today full of valuable information that won't only help people as ball players, but help people with their life, help people become better people. And Hannah just does an amazing job, and I was really thankful just to be able to have this conversation with her, and couldn't thank her enough for wanting to come on the show and talk about these strategies. If you don't follow her, please follow her on Instagram, follow her on Twitter. It's at Hannah Huesman, Huesman. On Twitter, it's at Hannah_Huesman, but it's HannahHuesman, Hannah Huesman. She is a great follow, full with ton. There's no fluff. It's a matter of things that you can use today to help you get better. And she does that even with the conversation we had about how she's helping the Phillies, how we might implement the mental game and mental skills, what kind of skills are going to help youth players and how she would do that. Then getting into the things that we would do daily, even for a parent. And, me as a parent, as well as a teacher, these are definitely valuable things that I can take in my classroom, take home to my kids, as well as taking on the field, helping ball players become having a better focus, being in the moment better, having more control of themselves when they fail, because we all know they are going to fail. So preparing them better for that. So just love this conversation. Hope you really enjoy it. Again, Hannah Huesman from the Philadelphia Phillies. She's the mental performance coach for them. Hopefully you fully enjoy it. Please reach out to her. Big time, great follow on Twitter and Instagram. So again, can't thank Hannah enough, and I hope you enjoy this episode with Hannah Huesman of the Philadelphia Phillies.
So I actually played basketball in my freshman year, and then I switched and played softball my last 3 years. So kind of a unique story, but yes, predominantly softball.
And do you feel like a lot of these skills that you're teaching now, did you already do them, or is it something that you have learned?
No, I definitely wasn't doing them when I was playing. And the more I read about it and the more I learned about it, I was like, why aren't we implementing this? Why is no one teaching us this? So that was actually what really made me excited to learn more about it, was because we weren't exposed to it. So no, I quickly realized that all of the things I was doing wrong when I was performing. So no, I really didn't get to use this when I was playing, unfortunately.
So then what is it? Was there like a moment in your career that kind of wanted you to go this direction, or was it after your career that you wanted to kind of go in this mental performance direction?
Yeah. So my senior year of undergrad, I actually was taking an elective course, and it was sports psychology. And I was like, what is this? Why aren't we using this? And then I was like, I want to learn everything about this. And so then I started doing research and found some grad school programs and decided to go get my master's. But it was just a random elective class. I was like, sure, it's something to do with sports. Like, my mom actually has her master's in psychology. So she was like, psychology won't be too bad. And I liked regular psych classes. So I was like, okay, I'll do this. And it ended up rocking my world. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so now you're with the Phillies and all.
Yeah.
And so how has things changed like from where you were and where you are now in terms of like the mental
Like,
preparation, in terms of like these skills? And because I think you can see a big change in like just how people like almost every big league team almost has a mental performance coach of some kind, right? I mean, so have you seen a big change? What kind of change in terms of that, the mental skills?
yeah, I mean, I think even within the last like 5 years, it's grown a lot. So my first internship was with the Pirates, and it was like the only internship at its time. It was like the first time they had ever done an internship, and it was kind of the only one of its kind. And now every year, every team has internships, right? In like the 5 year span. And so it's growing rapidly, and it's really cool how we have 4 mental skills coaches with the Phillies, and most other organizations, I think almost all have full staff, like full-time contracted staff. And if they don't, then they just kind of contract people out, but they still have mental skills coaches available for all the players. So it's really cool. And now, you have anywhere from 1 to, I think the highest is like 7 on an organization. So really, really starting to see those numbers increase. So it's definitely evolving, definitely growing. And I think it's going to continue to grow and head in the right direction for sure.
Yeah. So you said you guys have 4.
Yeah.
So like, and what is your role? So with having 4 of them, does each person like have like a level, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's different with every organization.
Yeah.
The way we do it is we have 2 who predominantly work with our Spanish speaking guys, and we have 2 who predominantly work with our English speaking guys. And
Oh,
obviously, I'm working with our English speaking guys. And then we don't really, it's hard, right? Everybody else does this differently too. Some teams have a different mental skills coach at every level. Sometimes you just kind of, as soon as you introduce someone, and those are the guys that you work with, and you kind of follow them up. So it's kind of different for everybody. But the way we do it is I kind of have double A down, and then so I'm technically a mental skills coordinator, so there's 2 mental skills coaches, coordinator, and then our director, and our director is with our big league team. And so it's unique too, because you have guys going throughout the system, and maybe they've built a relationship with one person, and so they kind of want to stay close with them and talk with them. So it's not really super black and white. It's kind of like we have the teams we mainly go visit, and then we also support anybody who we've made that connection with, and support them in whatever way they need. That's kind of our motto.
all right. So you won't. So like, that was one of the things I was wondering. Like, is like, are you teaching a specific curriculum now throughout the year, or is it something that you just kind of do as needed?
Yeah, so it's mostly on an as needed basis. We have different types of curriculum and different kinds of presentations and topics and themes and all of that, but it's really based on the individual's needs. And it's there's no cookie cutter answer to confidence. There's no cookie cutter answer to do anything. And so it's a lot of kind of figuring out who that person is, what works best for them, and how they can implement it to help their performance instead of hurting their performance. So it's a lot of individualizing a bunch of different concepts for sure.
Cool. Just writing it down. It's good. So just starting off with who the person is, because I like you said you're double A down. So when that person goes from double A and you want them to get promoted, and how like what's the you're trying to then just I guess relay that to the next coordinator and say, hey, this is what clicks for this guy. Here's who he is, and you're kind of going through those things.
Yeah, so we kind of do it in a way of we stay in constant communication. That way, if somebody comes down, somebody comes up, it's not starting from scratch. And they do have the notes and they do have the information, and then we just encourage the players to go meet with whatever mental skills coach is there, that day, because it does change, and we do rotate. And if you need assistance now and someone's there, like, go talk to them. We trust all of our mental skills coaches, and they can all help you in different ways. So yeah, that's pretty much what it is. We encourage them to go talk to them, but then we're always, if they call, we're not going to answer. So we always support them too if they ever want to call. And so it's kind of a combination of both, because we can't be everywhere at once. So it's kind of like whoever's on site, like, feel free to meet with them. And if there's nobody there, like, feel free to give anybody a phone call or FaceTime or Zoom and all that good stuff.
So what do you find out to be is there a common skill that you're always trying to develop, and do you see a common trait that people are needing more help with than others?
Yeah, there's a couple. I think one is dealing with all of the unknowns, especially right now. A big trait is knowing how to control what you actually have control over and how to not let all of the things you don't have control over affect you or stress you out or create this pressure that maybe isn't necessary. So it's really unique in making sure that they know how to cater to their needs and take care of themselves. And I say know thyself a lot because again, there's no short, sweet answer, and we have to figure out what's going to work best for you. But yeah, I think a big one is just having people know what to focus on and focus on it at the right time. That's kind of my definition of mental toughness, is being able to block everything else out when you're supposed to focus on one specific thing, being able to focus on that regardless of the circumstances. And so I think that's a pretty common one. If you can have control over what you focus on and be able to turn it off and turn it on when you need to, and relax when you need to and turn it on when you need to, I think that's a pretty powerful tool and honestly a separator for sure.
The ability to say that again. If you have the ability to, I guess, turn it on, turn it off when you're what you want to focus on.
Yeah. So it's almost like a light switch, right? Like, can you turn on the focus when you need to and focus on what you're supposed to focus on, regardless of what the situation is? And can you turn it off when you need to turn it off, right? A lot of times, it's hard to be locked in and stay locked in for 3 hours. Like most of us can't even stay locked in for 15 minutes, right? And so it's how do you know when you need to be on and know when need to be off and take advantage of both of those? Because when you need to be off, that's just as important as when you need to be on, right? You gotta let your guard down, you gotta relax a little bit, take a breather, and then that way when you're on, you're recharged, easier to focus instead of just like this elongated, really hard focus. And then by the end of the game, you're like, seeing doubles, right? Because you're so stressed or you've just been straining for so long. It's just as important to turn it off as it is to turn it on for sure.
So, like, what are some strategies you help guys with in order to give that focus?
Um, so one of the things I love to do is resetting routines. And that can look different for every player. I think some people like to reset find something that's always going to be there. Like look at the foul pole line, right? And if you see a foul pole line, every time you look at that, that's your reset cue. Maybe it's just doing the same thing every time to message your brain that no matter what the situation, no matter what the circumstances are, you're always messaging yourself in the same way. Maybe it's a deep breath. Maybe it's a visualizing success for you. Maybe it's visualizing bulldog mentality, right? Maybe it's hyping yourself up and self-talk. It could really be anything. But that's the hardest part of mental skills, is you have to figure out what you need and then when you need it the most. And then you have to remember to do it. And it's kind of funny, but like that's one of the main things is a lot of people just forget to do it. And they're like, oh, I forgot to implement that right then and there. And it's like, oh, well, how can we remember to implement it? And so a lot of times it's just remembering to do something.
So your reset routines are mostly for how to focus, especially like after adversity, or especially after something time they fail, or
yeah, I think that's when you need it most, but
yeah.
I think you should be doing it all the time, right? Because if you only do something when you're failing, then you're messaging your body that something's off, right? Something's different. And that's why I think it's so important. People always talk about, I want to perform consistently, right? I want to be consistent with X, Y, and Z. And it's like, in order to be consistent, you have to do the same thing to prepare for that consistency. And that's where routines come in. And so, yes, I want you to do this when you're failing and when you're struggling, but you should also be doing it when you're doing well. So that way, regardless of the situation, right? If it's the first pitch of the game, if it's the last pitch of the ninth inning, bottom of the ninth inning, right? Game on the line, or the World Series, you're still going to do the same thing. Because it's when you start changing that reset routine or changing that routine, whatever it is, that you're messaging your body like something's different, the pressure's on, don't mess up, right? All of those things we're trying to avoid, which is exactly why you want to message yourself in the same way, regardless of the situation. That way your body's just like, okay, it's another batter, it's another pitch, it's another game, right? Same same consistency, same routines, no matter what the situation is, for sure.
So you call those your reset routines?
Mm-hmm.
And is that, and then what you were talking about there was like making it every batter. So that, is that necessarily a reset routine, or is that almost like a pre-pitch routine? Would you call that the same thing, or is that different?
Yeah. You can, I call it pre-pitch routine, reset routine. It's kind of the same thing, but to me, you should reset between every pitch, whether you're the hitter or the pitcher, because, right, you want to, it's kind of like, we take this, you can go into great detail with this, right? Like technically a reset routine should be 12 to 15 seconds, right? Because that's how many seconds are in between a pitch. And so if you really want to, you can break down those 12 seconds and say in the first 4 seconds, I'm going to allow myself an immediate reaction, right? Of whatever that pitch was, right? Whether you're mad, happy, whatever. And then the next 4, I'm going to learn from it, right? I'm going to take away, okay, this is what he threw me. This is what I think he's going to throw me, whatever. And then the last 4 seconds are the last message you want to tell yourself before you're about to swing, whatever it is, whether it's see the ball, hit the ball, whether it's the pitch you're looking for, whether it's compete, whether it's whatever you want it to be. And so I think they can kind of be the same pre-pitch, post-pitch, reset routine. I think you can use all kinds of terminology, but I think whatever you call it, it should be happening pretty consistently in between each one.
Sure. And then when you're looking at, let's say, the foul pole, like what you were talking about, that is that you call that a different routine? Like, let's say, like you're spiraling out of control and you need to like get yourself back on focus. Like, hey, I'm out of focus. I'm thinking about this, and I'm distracted. Do I need to get back here? Or...
So I mean, that can be part of your 12-second reset routine, right? You can be doing those things and looking at the foul pole and taking a deep breath at the same time. Now, I think kind of what you may be alluding to is like an emergency plan, right? Like when things are going wrong, like what do you do when you start to panic? And I definitely think I call those contingency planning, because we're not planning to fail, right? But we know we're going to fail because it's the game of baseball, and so it's really kind of being aware of, okay, I'm failing, I'm about to be on this downward spiral. What's a tool or a strategy I can pull out to kind of stop that downward spiral? And maybe that is looking at the left out foul pole line. Maybe it's singing a song. Maybe it's a mantra. Maybe it's a prayer, right? Like a lot of guys are very religious, like whatever that is for you, that maybe you can't do every single time because it takes too long. Maybe it's just unvelcroing your batting gloves, right? To show, okay, next pitch, I think it can be anything you want it to be, as long as it has meaning. And I think that's the most important part is if shit's hitting the fan, right? And you haven't prepared and you don't have something, it's probably not going to be that useful. But if you've already talked about it, right, which is what a contingency plan is, like, okay, when all these things are going wrong, this is what I'm going to do, then you're going to have a better chance of getting out of that or it being shortened, right? Whereas if you haven't planned for that and prepared for that, then you may have to downward spiral before you figure out what's going to actually help it. And so I think that's a big piece of mental skills, is making sure you're being proactive instead of just reactive on everything that's happening.
Very, very good. So like when you get, let's say you get the rookie ball, because that's what you got. So are you presenting them with these things and even asking them, hey, do you have a contingency plan or do you have a reset routine? Like, are you talking to them? Like, you're trying to build that language with them?
Yeah, absolutely. From day one, we're trying to, and the conversation starts with, have you ever done any kind of mental skills work? And, whether if the answer is yes, great. What is it? If the answer is no, I don't necessarily believe that, because I think most people do mental skills work and they just may not call it that. They might not call it that, right? Resiliency training, staying calm under pressure, getting motivated, like those are all mental skills techniques and strategies and skills. And so it might not have been labeled that, but it can create really cool conversations around what they've already done, and then kind of trying to carry that over, and even asking them what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, and really figuring that out.
Was there anything like, well, I guess if you're looking back on your career, like, was there things that you did that you're like, you didn't realize like yourself that was part of mental skills, and as you had to learn?
Yeah, I think I was really good at internal motivation. Most people were motivated by wins and money and fame and followers and all that. And I always thought like I wanted to be good for like me. Like I wanted to be good because I wanted to be good, like no other reason, right? I wanted to be the fastest for me. I wanted to get hits for me because like I like somehow, some way, and I'm guessing it's because my parents kind of instilled this, like there's so much more to life than just like money and fame and like that stuff is nice, but it's not forever and that feeling won't last forever. But what does is like making yourself proud and like being the best you can possibly be has always been a huge motivator for me. And like, you know, I want to be better than I was yesterday. I want to continue to progress forward every single day. And so I think internal motivation was something that back then I didn't really understand the value of. And now, you know, you see guys who have internal motivation, like it's just like you just naturally work harder. Your work ethic is there. Your respect is there. The grind is there. The mental toughness is almost always there. And so just because you can battle through anything, because it's not just the money that's dictating it, it's you that's dictating it. And I think that can be really powerful when used appropriately.
Absolutely. That was awesome.
But it's funny because I had no clue. You know, I had no clue what I was doing back then. And that's actually the first time I've really gotten a question like that. So it's cool to think about.
Yeah, for sure. Like now, because I was thinking while you were saying that is like visualization was something that I, for whatever reason, and I love playing defense too, you know. So like, and I never realized that I would always see myself making this and this and this in play, you know, or hitting this ball here, you know, and you know, I never knew what it was, you know, but now, you know, thinking about it, and I'm like, you know, visualization is such a big part of what you hear, and there's people just need to know, you know, and because that could be something that, yeah, like I was missing a little bit of yours, you know, but if we can put these pieces together and maybe try to draw more awareness to these things, and that'll kind of help mold like I said, just help them draw awareness and get guys even better.
Heck yeah. And that's what we're trying to do. And it's funny. And like, that's similar to conversations I have with people who have like been in the field of baseball, you know, longer than I've been alive. And it's like, no, we never really did mental skills training. We didn't need this back then. And then we start talking to them and all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I did goal setting. We did self-talk. We did imagery. We did visualization. We did some kinds of meditation. And I'm like, that's mental skills, right? But they just didn't have the label on it. And now we've progressed to a world that's like, oh shoot, some of these are trainable. Like we can get better in visualization. We can get better in intrinsic motivation. So let's make sure we have people on here getting our guys better at this. And I think that's the coolest thing. It's not this new thing that nobody's ever done. People have always been doing it, but now we have people there training it, getting it better, making sure it's just as strong as your physical game. And that, you know, when you get to the big leagues, my worst case scenario is that mentally you're not ready, right? Like physically you're ready and everybody thinks you're ready. And then mentally you choke or you can't perform or you get nervous or you don't know how to handle your first failure, right? Because you're going to fail in the big leagues. And so I think that's the piece that kind of one of the last pieces to the puzzle. And so I think it's awesome that people are really buying into it and implementing it and believing in it and knowing that this is very serious. And if you want to be successful, we got to train this. We got to get better at this.
That is great and I think there is a little bit, you know, like just with so much going on in the game and the game's trying to move forward, you know, old school versus new school, things like that. People want to say that stuff, but it's almost like that's how you're kind of connecting the old school versus the new school. Is just like, look, like these things were all there. This is why you guys were great, because you did these things. And we're trying to get like, you know, this middle average road guy to that next level. So I think that's pretty
100%.
cool. Pretty cool that you're able to kind of bridge that gap with those guys.
And that's, if you know anything about baseball, like old school versus new school is very big right now, right? You have this whole new world of technology coming in and, you know, people who were born and raised in the tech world and then people who were born and raised in the baseball world. And it's like, what's right and what's wrong? And I'm a firm believer that we need both to be successful. We need old school baseball. We need like these people who have been in the game for 50 years see things that a machine's never going to see, right? They see that they're showing their pitches before anybody else sees it, right? And so I think that's vital for our success. But then the machine and the technology have things that the human eye can't see. And it's like, we need that too. And so I think the perfect world does exist, but those two polar opposite worlds have to figure out how to work together. And I think mental skills coaches are always put in a situation where you're kind of in the middle, right? Because the coaches talk to you and vent to you. The players talk to you and vent to you. And so you have all of this information that's confidential information, and it's your job to kind of navigate and figure out, okay, we have all of this information that not a lot of people have, right? Only one side has this and one side has this. How can we put it together and create something incredible that brings everybody together without breaking confidentiality, which is a really hard part of our job. But, it's like, you can't just take that information and then throw it away, right? You got to take it and make sure our organization is getting better because of it. And so that's something that's incredibly challenging. But you hit the nail on the head when you said old school versus new school. And I hope that we are helpful in bridging those two gaps without a doubt.
So bridging while maintaining confidentiality, that's got to be tough.
Yeah, it is. But, in our job, right, as mental skills coaches, our job is to create these relationships and trust with the players. And if they don't trust us, then they're not going to tell us anything.
And the coaches,
100%,
right?
100%. And so it's like that confidentiality cannot be broken, because the minute they think it's broken, they're not going to trust you. The relationship is shot and they're not going to talk to you. And it's vital for our success. And so my number one priority is building trust and relationships with the players, because I think you can do your job as a mental skills coach without the great relationship. But I think it goes to a whole nother level when you have that depth and that relationship and that trust and that vulnerability within that relationship, that now all of a sudden we're getting to the good stuff. Now all of a sudden this player, this staff member isn't afraid to say, Hannah, this is where I'm weak at, help me, right? Instead of like, yeah, I'm okay, just surface level stuff and helping when we can, versus like real hard, difficult conversations, all because of that trust and that honesty.
And that's what I find it to like, and as you like, as guys are going quickly through the ranks and things like that, like how do you do that? Like how are you doing that efficiently? Being able to build trust in something that's really quick. Like, how do you do that when it's so fluid? Every roster's so fluid, and then you got to go talk to the next guys. Like how are you able to try to do that efficiently?
Yeah, that's a really, really, really good question. And I'm not sure I have like a perfect answer for it. But one of the things I will say is, we're not in every huddle, right? Because mental skills, I'm not in the middle of the huddle motivating them in the middle of a game, right? But I am always around. And that's a huge factor for mental skills coaches, is I think you always have to be around. Like even when you're in one-on-one meetings, right? And you're up in your office between meetings, go outside, right? Stand behind the bullpen, stand behind home plate, walk around, talk, right? Because even like simple little touches of like, hey, how are you? A 3-minute conversation can create like, oh, this person cares about me, right? There's so many people around in baseball, and there's so many more players than there are staff members, that if you can even like show someone, hey, I see you and I care about you, like, not that that's a rarity, but it almost is a rarity, right? Because everyone's like, let's perform better. Let's be the best we can. And so I think the advantage we have is I'm going to show that I care about you as a person more than I care about you as a baseball player. And I think that is a unique feeling to experience in the baseball world. And so if I'm the number one person doing that in our organization, then it's almost like a leg up. Like, okay, the person who makes me feel the most comfortable and like it really has my back is Hannah, because I don't have a say in if they're going to get cut or not, right? I have nothing to do with that. And so it's this, whereas maybe everybody else does, right? They're pitching coaches, like they call pitching coaches and say, how are they doing? And nobody calls mental skills coach and says, because we can't, because it's confidential. And so I think it's providing them with that space, and maybe we're the one person on there who can create that. And so maybe that speeds up the process a little bit more. But I think the biggest secret is making sure you're always around, making small touches here and there, right? Like always saying hello, and then prioritizing the person over the athlete, right? So like when they walk in, I'm not like, how are you pitching? I'm like, how are you doing? Like, how's everything going? Like, how are you handling all of this? And then we get into the performance side of things, of course, because that's what I do. It's not counseling, it's not therapy, but a part of mental performance coaching is making sure the player is just as good as the person, or the person is even better than the player in most cases. So I think that's how you do it. It's not, I know you're a baseball player, but I know you're a person too. And so I think that's a refreshing view for them, right? It's to not be talking about baseball. Like, we're going to talk about baseball and we're going to help you, but we're also going to talk about your dog, and we're going to talk about your family and how you miss your family right now. And that's okay. And that's normal. And how do we handle that, and supporting them on all realms of their life almost.
Sure. And they're going to be a person longer than will be a baseball player.
Absolutely. And some of them don't realize that yet, but they will soon enough.
Well, it's hard to. I mean, it's hard to be that focused, and when you're trying to be elite of the elite, and that goal of becoming it can be consuming, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, I think the perspective that I think the great ones have as well is what really separates people too.
Couldn't agree more.
So I know you do some great stuff with like your Mental Sweat Monday. I think you just recently talked about perspective too. So like, what are something that you do, like speaking of perspective, like keeping guys' perspective on things?
Yeah, so it's funny you say that, because I think right now, with everything going on, this is the perfect opportunity to hold that perspective, right?
Sure.
And when we were at spring training, like, spring training's a grind. It's the hardest time of the year, or one of the hardest times of the year. And everyone's like, let's just get through it. Like, we can do it. And it's easy to complain and get stuck in that. And then we got sent home, and we thought we were going to be home for a couple of weeks, and I think it's been 5 months now, right? And it's like, I hope, if we get anything out of this whole entire pandemic and everything surrounded around COVID, is that we can have perspective, because nothing's worse than having to be home and not playing the game we love and not doing the work we love. And, we're doing it from Zoom and we're playing from home, but it's just not the same. And so I think perspective is huge. I think in everything you do and everything that happens to you, you have a choice of how you view it and how you handle it. And I think you have to know yourself and know when certain situations are going to get you riled up and when certain situations aren't. And when they are, is that helping your performance or is that hurting your performance? And then kind of being able to go back and know, okay, this is the perspective I have to have on this in order for it to help my performance. Because if I just have one specific perspective on this and it's my immediate reaction, it's going to hurt my performance.
It's almost like a fixed mindset.
Yeah, it's very similar to a fixed mindset and growth mindset, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to fail, right? Am I going to be pissed off? And like, I can be pissed off for a second, but if I stay pissed off, is that going to help my performance or is it going to hurt my performance? And if it's going to hurt my performance, then I got to figure out how to shift the perspective on that failure to help me instead of hurting me. Which is really, really, really challenging, especially in the heat of the moment, especially under high stress, high pressure situations. I do love growth versus fixed mindset too. Good stuff.
So how are you able to implement that within the program? Because I was like I said, I talked to you about Catherine Rowe, for the Orioles, and that was something that they really focused on as well. Do you guys focus on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think growth mindset and fixed mindset is like in everyday conversations. I think, a growth mindset is basically means you can learn everything, right? You're always evolving. You're always trying to learn and do new things. And whereas a fixed mindset is almost where you think you're as good as you're going to get. And there are some people with fixed mindsets. And so it's almost just educating them around awareness of the difference between a growth and a fixed mindset and letting them kind of figure out, which category do I fall into? And is it a good one or is it a hurtful one? And really trying to let them kind of figure that out. I think that's a huge piece of mental skills too, is like, if you can let them figure it out and let them own that, then they may be more willing to change it or to try something different instead of just saying, hey, fixed mindset's bad, have a growth mindset, right? It's like, well, which one do you think you have? Which one do you think would help you more in your career and why? And how can we adjust to make sure you're in a growth mindset more than you're in a fixed mindset. But I'd say for the most part, most of the guys are in growth mindset just because to be at that level, right, you're kind of always hoping for something and trying to search for something more and gain something more and learn something more every day. Don't get me wrong, not everybody is, but for the majority part, most of them are in growth mindset. So it's cool. And, if they're talking to me, that's kind of telling me they're in a growth mindset because they want to know more. They want to learn more. They want to be better from a mental perspective. And so it's cool to see them kind of own that for sure. Yeah. And maybe not even realize they're doing it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the drawing awareness is key. I was just thinking that two things, like when you came to that. One was coaches. And you hear like old school versus new school. There's a growth and fixed mindset there. And then two, the other thing about coaches, and because I'm sure you've seen it at the college level too, is with your job and the mental skills thing, mental skills and performance. Does the manager, do the coaches have to be as on board with it to be more successful, or is it mostly just still player driven? Because I know at the lower levels, it's not something that, this guy just comes in and then it leaves. Like that's not going to fly. But what do you see at your level, at the professional level? Is it different where it doesn't matter if the manager really is on board? They're totally separate, or
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking out. I just started, because when you start fixed and growth mindset, I'm sure like if the guy in charge thinks that this is important, then the guys below them are going to say it's important.
for sure. No, and so I learned something back in my Pirates internship, that during that time I didn't understand it at all, and now I clearly understand it. And it was the priorities of mental skills in general. And number one was the culture. Number two was the coaches, and number three was the players. And like when I first heard that, I was like, what? Like, no, players are number one priority, right? Like, we got to meet with them, we got to help them. But if you really break it down and think about it, and now like I couldn't agree with it more, it all starts with culture, right? And if mental skills is not a part of the everyday culture, then it's just going to be this weird thing that you add on at the end of the day, right? Like, hey, go to this mental skills workshop at 4:00 at the end of the day, right? During spring training. Or we don't do it all the time. Every now and then somebody comes in and does some talk and you're hyped up for 30 minutes and then you forget it, right? It's like, it's imperative that just like, strength and conditioning, dry work, stretching, rehab, nutrition, all of those things are a part of the culture. And without it, you're not getting to be the best you can possibly be. And so same with mental skills, it has to be a part of the rotation. And so that's something really cool that we've been doing, is like, as players rotate different stations, mental skills is one of those stations. Like if you're a Philly baseball player, you're going to partake in mental skills, like no questions asked. And so I think culture is a huge piece. And then number two is the coaches, because of exactly what you said, right? If none of the coaches buy in and aren't for you, then it's going to be really hard to just get the players on board with them. Because like we said earlier, right? Like there's only 4 of us. And so we can't be everywhere at once, but the coaches are everywhere at once. And like, if you break it down, I think it's like each coach has like 15 to 20 players that is directly under them, that they have touches with every single day, that they're with all season. And if those coaches can be on board to mental skills, they can be giving mental messages too when we're not there. And like they can be talking to us and say, hey, this guy's struggling with this. What could I do? What could I say? How could I help when we're not there? And then of course there's like, if the coaches buy in, just like what you said, if the manager buys in, if the coaches buy in, if the coordinators buy in, then all of a sudden the players are going to realize, okay, the coaches are making this important. This is another thing I need to make sure I'm making important too. Because this isn't just something that is available to me. This is something that I absolutely need and is necessary for my success. And they're concerned with it and they want me to be good at it too. So I need to make sure I make this a priority. So, and then you get to the players, but once you have those two things, then it should be like the players just know we're going to have mental skills meetings. The coaches back this and think this is good. Why wouldn't I do this? Right. And you just have a ton more buy-in when you have those first, when you have culture and coaches before you have the players, versus just directly trying to get the players to come in on their own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great, Joe. And man, that's great. So Clint Hurdle, was he the manager there when you were interning?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I know he's been very very into all of those skills, and that's
yeah, sure. Yeah, he was. He sure was.
Mm-hmm. But oh man, that's great. So like, do you have to have meetings with the coaches and the players then to try to keep the coaches, give them the strategies?
Yeah. So we we meet with coaches too. We meet with them to help on their own mental skills and what they do. And then we also talk different strategies and techniques of like common scenarios that happen. And like they're obviously not going to be able to go in depth to like our degree, but they're proficient in what they're good at. And so we kind of try to make them be really good at their job with sprinkling some mental skills. So like tips and tricks, and like even just talking about the reset routine, like having like reset the left foul pole line when needed, like them having that in their back pocket could even be helpful to support a player. And then, you know, if it's serious, then we've also created a path of easy communication, right? If this coach is like, hey, I've been working with this guy, we've done a couple things, I still think he needs to have a deeper conversation, would you call him? Or I've encouraged him to call you, you know? And so that way it's like, instead of just like, hey, how's it going? Now you have a coach involved who can help accelerate a process where maybe a player wouldn't call as soon as like they start to struggle, but maybe they could call. And then all of a sudden we know to touch base with the player. And so it's just cool that that relationship can create so many more opportunities than it would if we didn't even have that. So that's important too.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Being able to, and so like, and I love the conversation you're having with coaches. So like we said, the routines, is there anything else that really pops up that try to like what you're trying to give coaches? Like what, like kind of, I guess a toolbox in a sort.
Yeah. I think routines are good. Mindfulness is a big one. Anything to help the players become more in the present moment, I think is always a big one, which we pair mindfulness and breathing with all the time. So I think that's a big one. And then I think another big one kind of goes back to making sure the coaches are at least helping the players know when to press and when to not press, right? Or what to give your motivation and your time and your energy to, and what not to. So don't worry so much about the things outside of your control, worry more about the things inside of your control. And the coaches can reiterate that by like reminding them, okay, we're focusing on the process and not the outcome on every single thing that we do. And so I think that's a huge reminder to give them too. And they can almost always go back to that no matter what the situation or circumstance is. Okay, you're really focused on the outcome right now. That's clearly hurting your performance. What could we be focusing on? You know, the steps to get to that outcome, right? The process in order to get to that outcome instead of just focusing on the outcome alone.
And when you talk about being in the present moment, you talk about that being in the present moment. What are some strategies that you allow the coaches to get? So like what do you differentiate between being in the present moment kind of skills versus the reset routines?
So for me, being in the present moment really comes down to your self-talk, your thought process, and your deep breath. Because I think for me, the reason I use a deep breath and the reason I tell people to use a deep breath is to solely get into the present moment. Now, part of your reset routine is to be in the present moment, right? So the reset routine, going back to those 4 seconds, right? The first 4 seconds are evaluating what just happened, the past, right? The next 4 seconds are evaluating what they think is about to happen. Okay, they threw me this. Here's what I think. So that's future. And then the last 4 seconds is pulling you back into the present moment, right? It's saying like, see the ball, hit the ball, look for the low slider, whatever you're trying to hit, right? Or the message you're trying, like compete, whatever that message is, you're pulling yourself back into the present moment. So I think present moment is kind of, and should be in everything, defense, offense, a post-game stretch. Like I think every time, because if you're not in the present moment, you're typically going through the motions. And most of the time, if you really dissect being in the present moment, it's actually really hard to be in the present moment as a human being because there's so much going on, right? We're worrying about what's about to happen, or we're mad about what already happened, right? In the future and in the past. And so to be in the present moment, which we know if we're in the present moment, we perform our best. And we know we enjoy more and we're more motivated when we're in the present moment. And so it's like, why would we not try to get in the present moment as much as possible? But it's not an easy skill because it's hard. It's easier to get into to worry about what happened or to stress about what's going to happen. And it's quite difficult to get right into the moment you're in. So I think they tie together really nicely. But for me, that's a huge factor. And almost every mental skill is awareness is being in the present moment, right? Which I believe awareness is the foundation of all mental skills. And awareness is like knowing what's going on in your head. And you can't know what's going on in your head if you're not in your head in that moment. And so I think that's where mindfulness plays a big piece too. And I think you have to train that off the field before you can train it on the field, right? Just like you wouldn't train physical skills on the field first, you're not going to implement something new in a game. Same with mental skills. Like you gotta get this down before, and then practice it in practice, and then implement it in a game. And I think sometimes people think you can just jump in and do it in a game, and it's not like that. It's just like a physical skill. You got to practice it.
Is that so? When you're walking around practice or like early work before games, is that something that you try to practice with them at that time and say, hey, like, are you intentional about saying, well, we got to work on these different things with your guys?
Yeah, it's usually not like me walking around right before the game. It's hopefully happening in conversations well before the game. And again, like being really, really proactive about like, what is your pregame routine? What are you going to be doing? What should I be looking for you implementing? And what should you be looking for you implementing? Instead of just like being right on them right before the game. Like, hey, are you doing this? Are you doing your breathing? And again, like I think the most important part of my job is I work myself out of a job, right? My whole job is to equip them to, no matter what circumstances they're faced with, they know how they best handle them and what they need. And so it's hard because you want to help in all instances, but you also can't become a crutch, because mentally you can become a crutch fast, right? And they want to talk, they want to tell you everything. They want your advice on everything. And that's good in the beginning. But then at the end, like, they got to start kind of weaning off and like making it themselves. And they know it. They just kind of want to have a conversation about it, which is great too. And I think super powerful and serves great for reminders, but we're not going to be there, right? I'm not going to be on the mound during the shitstorm of a situation. You are, only you are. And so you have to be able to come up with these things on your own. And if you can't, then we're not doing the right things. And we need to simplify, or we need to change it up a bit, or, figure out how are you going to be able to do this without me, without a coach? It's just you. It's only you up there. And how can you make that work? And I think that's why mental skills is so awesome in baseball, because there's so much time where it's just you and you, right? That's it. And you really have to know what you need and how to give it to yourself when nobody else is going to give it to you, whether it's confidence, motivation, composure, resiliency, whatever the skill is. Like, you have to be able to create it yourself, because nobody else is going to create it for you.
Sure. Got to be your best coach.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Best critic, and best fan. You got to be your biggest critic and your biggest fan.
Yeah. And I love how you said you work yourself right out of a job. I think that a lot of counselors and things like that, we forget that that's the purpose, and knowing those kind of things. And it's nice that people are trying to want help, but like at the same time, like, you got to figure this out. I love how you said work myself out of a job. I've never heard that. And it's really good. Yeah. So it's good to keep that perspective for sure.
For sure. No doubt. And if we're not, then we got to make some adjustments.
Yeah. So let's get into like a little bit of like, how would you do this? Okay. So like, let's say you're back in high school, or going to coaching high school, or, little league. How soon are you trying to develop a routine and talk to guys about taking deep breaths and those kind of things?
I love this question. And I don't know if there's a set answer, but I know you can start talking about it at an early age. And mental skills is weird, right? Because you can't really force mental skills, right? Like, some drills you can force it on them, but like when you force mental skills, sometimes you could do more damage than good, right? And so it's like you got to dance with them instead of like wrestle them to the ground and make them do certain things. And so, when I introduce stuff, I'm like, look, it's going to be weird. It's going to be funny. It's going to be awkward. If you're going to laugh, that's okay. Laugh, but try to bring yourself back to whatever it is we're doing. Like, and I'm not going to get mad about that. But I think I worked with, I think it was 10 and 11-year-old boys, and it was like 7 or 8 of them in a room, and it was a nightmare. Like, you can't, like, in a room inside trying to do it, like pens clicking constantly. Like, it was really, really challenging. And so I commend anyone and everyone who work with children, because I think the power in mental skills lies in the depth of it, right? It lies in the, why are we doing this? And how do you actually do it, instead of just the, what do we actually do? And like with kids, like, you really can only explain the what, and they just can't really process, why do we have to do this? And how do we actually do? Okay, take a deep breath. Okay, I did it. I don't know why I did it, and I'm not really sure how to do it, but I did it, right? And so, but I think you can always implement it. And I think, I don't know, maybe around the age of like 13, 14 is where I think it could really start, because they're at the age where they can have a somewhat depth conversation about it, right? And understand that we're not just doing this because we're told to do it. We're doing this because it can impact greater things in our career. But I think, even having 10 and 11-year-olds just sit in the grass for 1 minute, just lay on your back, listen to your breathing. That's it. Like, okay, great. Get up. Here we go. Let's go. I think introducing them to concepts, and, even if it's something as simple as like, knowing like routines, right? Or just like make your bed in the morning, right? Or we're going to put our socks on before our shoes. Like those are all like foundational skills, leading to mental skills, right? Organize your room, clean your room, right? Like, and I think if you can instill some of the like everyday maybe things that mental skills take or could be used in, then all of a sudden, we go from, okay, why do we do this? Because we've always done this, right? Okay, I know I make my bed. Okay, this is why you do this. I know I have my routine in the morning. I have to brush my teeth before I go to bed. Now I know I have to take a deep breath before I take this swing. And so I think it's really just kind of finding ways to implement it in everyday living versus maybe just sports. Maybe that's the disconnect, right? And because it's like a no-brainer to teach people how to do things off the field, but maybe when it comes to kids, instead of like only programming mental skills to be connected with sport, maybe mental skills should be connected with life. And like, let's start focusing on how we studied instead of the grade we got, right? Well, what happened, right? Why did we get an A on this one and a D on this one? Let's go back and look. And then it's like all of a sudden, maybe one day they have this aha moment of like, wow, okay, all of these things, process versus outcome, priorities, time management, routines, taking care of myself, all of a sudden roll over into mental skills. And now we get to take it up 10 notches, and implement it to the 10th degree of making it specific for baseball and their routines and what makes them better for that. I've never really thought about it, but I think if you can implement it on a daily basis in little ways that they may not even be aware of what they're doing, then that's kind of the best way to start. Instead of like, hey, we need to sit down and do goal setting because that's what mental skills coaches tell us to do. Like, I don't think that's going to work, right? Maybe you have them write down one goal and put it on a sticky note and put it on their bathroom mirror and don't really say anything about it, right? And then all of a sudden you're ingraining that one of the biggest skills of goal setting is writing it down and putting it somewhere you see every day. Mm-hmm. But they may not know why. They may not know why that's important or how it's going to work, but they know we did it. And so then it's like, oh, when we get to real goal setting, then so maybe it's just that. Maybe it's just implementing it in small ways in everyday life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like that because, I like being, like the whole podcast about being better men, better ball players. It's just through my being mentally tougher, me being physically better. Typically, if I'm a better person, that then also leads to me being mentally tougher, being physically better. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like you're looking at if I do make my bed, if I am brushing my teeth, if I'm having good night routines, if I'm having good morning routines, those typically lead over to me having good, or easily being able to get them done on the playing field, whatever that might be.
Yeah. Or maybe it's even like not having electronics at your kitchen table for dinner. Like we're prioritizing being present, right? We're all going to be here right now, whether you want to be here or not. Mm-hmm. Like things so simple as that. And it's funny because even saying that, like I look back and like my family sat down at a kitchen table every night growing up, no phones, nothing. Right. And it's like, we were instilling like being in the present moment and we had no clue. I don't even think my parents knew, but they knew that's what they wanted to do, And so I think that's actually where the value comes. I'm going to think about that and kind of create a list of like 10 or 15 things I think like you can do with kids on a daily basis to start implementing mental skills. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, to be able to
when I come up with more, I'll let you know.
Sounds great. But like, because I know like even our school, like, I teach seventh grade. So, but I know our principal and things like that want to teach mindfulness, want to get into mindfulness and but it's basically like what you're saying, like, all right, let's take a minute, just take some deep breaths and that's all we're going to do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I think at the middle school level, they need to know, why am I doing this? Because I'm not going to do that if I don't know. why, you know? And I think coming from a person like you or somebody like that, like, hey, like this is pretty important, you know, and here's why we do these things because of our brain and all the science behind it. Um, you know, I think, and then also too, because we have to get our teachers on board with why in the world am I going to take time out of my schedule to do this?
And we do that with, you know, coaches. And one of our big things that we implement with the Phillies the last couple of years is encouraging the guys, the players, to ask why. And it lets them understand at a deeper level, but it also challenges the coaching and the staff to know, like, we're not just implementing this to implement something. You know, we don't just see something on Twitter and implement it. We want to know the science behind it. We want to know, why are we going to do this? Is this going to work? You know, and be able to explain it in a way that the players understand it. And that way we're all growing because of that. And like, they're growing, we're continuing to grow, right? It goes kind of back to growth mindset, but that's vital. Like, and the older they get, the more people want to know why, and the more bought in they are when you have a good reason for why or how we do something. Like, if you know the why and the how of something, like, you don't question the what. Like, you're like, okay, I get it. I see the benefits of this. I know exactly how I'm supposed to do it. Let's do it. And versus just like, because I said so, or because it's always been done this way, which is no longer an acceptable answer, at least in the baseball world.
It's not really in the parenting world.
You
know, so it's crazy. But I think that's even in the best leadership world. And the best leadership is really going to start with purposeful. I don't see why you're doing something if you don't have a good purpose behind it, anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, goodness gracious, we're nearly an hour in already. I mean, Hannah, so like, I guess the advice, the advice you were kind of saying is about, 13 and 14. I guess they're saying the end of middle school age is about trying to start getting into the why and things like that. And I know, because like my kids are 9, and I love what you said about like, and I haven't even thought about that, like, because we don't allow those things at dinner table, and just to be present, and I'm like, that's great, we are trying to teach them to be present. And and my wife is great about like all her routines and things like that, and we're telling our kids, when you get up, this is what you do, and my son loves playing baseball, and you see him taking deep breaths and this kind of things. We take deep breaths when we're getting out of control, and we're like, let's just take a time out here, just take some breaths and get yourself under control. So, and that's kind of led into it. It's not like I've told him, hey, you need to take a deep breath every time, like, you don't throw a strike.
Yeah.
But it was just like, because right now it's hard for them as young kids to deal with a lot of failure. Kids cry, and it's good to see them take a deep breath. But I think like what you're saying is perfect. Is like, it's a matter of, what do you do on a daily basis at home that would allow that? And those are the things that I talk about mental health, and I don't really like mindfulness, but like those things are just like, they're mental skills. And I think that even the simplest terms of that will be, that's the conversation that people could be having, is just good mental skills to have when things aren't going well. Going to take a deep breath, or when you're not here, to like just put your stuff away, to be more in the present moment. Those are great. I think that's a whole nother, almost a whole other topic we could get into too.
Yeah. And I think that's great. I just had a thought too, it's like, maybe you start, practicing self-evaluation at the house too. Like, hey, what's one thing you did well at school today? What's one thing that went well, right? Because self-evaluation is a huge mental skill too. And most people are really bad self-evaluators. Like, they either think they're way better than they actually are, or way worse than they actually are. And so it's like, can you start instilling like good evaluation? And then when they're evaluating themselves, like, make sure they're evaluating things that they can actually control, versus like, I got a home run today. Well, that's cool. But what did you control about that? What was in your power of that? Why did you hit a home run today? Right. And really starting to refine their mindset, and like, to look at the process instead of the outcome, because everything else in the world is messaging us to notice the outcome, right? What were your grades? What's your GPA? What's your batting average? What's your ERA, right? All of these things, it's like constantly telling us what our outcome is, and nobody focuses on the process. And if you can start like really honing in on the importance of the process, like, here's why we make our beds. Here's why we don't have things at the table. Here's how you made an A on this, because you worked. Like, if somebody comes home and makes an A, maybe instead of being like, nice job, being like, I know how hard you worked and how many hours you are. I saw that. And that was incredible hard work. Like, right. Commend the hard work, not the A, right? Like, and I think that's really interesting. And comes down to parenting. I'm like, what are you praising? And are you being consistent? That's my biggest advice when talking with parents. It's like, be as consistent as possible and praise the process. Like, don't always praise the outcome, right? Don't, because you hit a home run, we're going to go get a snack today. Well, you struck out 3 times, so no snack today. It's like, what? We're instilling to only worry about the outcome. And it's like, what if they went 0 for 3, but they battled every at bat, right? Like, hey, I really saw you battle. I saw you have a good attitude and you worked your tail off. Let's go. Like, that's what we're going to reward. Like, we're excited. Or you struck out and then the next at bat, you battled, you came back. You weren't upset. You didn't cry. Like, that's amazing. Like, you stayed like, let's reward and acknowledge the things that they actually have control over, which is attitude, effort, preparation when they get older, things like that. I think that's immeasurable. You can't, if they can figure out that that's the important stuff early, I think it's going to be a lot easier late in life, I think, especially in like high pressure situations and high elite level sports and elite level businesses, all of that stuff.
Attitude, effort, preparation.
Yep. That's APE. I always say control your APE. Yep.
That's right. So are there any, Hannah, this has been great. It's already been an hour. So I want to respect your time and things like that. But so like, if anyone could, like, cause there are so many great things here. If anyone want to kind of reach out to you, best way to follow you or maybe contact you to even learn more about great things you're putting out there.
Yeah. So, I'm big on Instagram and it's just Hannah Huesman on Instagram, or, Twitter is Hannah_Huesman, I believe. Those are the best ways to reach out. Just shoot me a DM or anything if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them.
It's Hannah _ under here, right? Hannah _
Yes. Yes, for Twitter. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's so awesome. It's awesome. I was funny. Yeah. I just one last thing, because I know the one time you were just talking about the sub-evaluation stuff, which is really cool. Because I know that one of your latest, another Monday message was about about how we only focus on like that one negative thing out of what, the whole day or our whole self, and I'm sure with baseball, it's just like that, because I mean, I'm just telling you, you're 3 for 4. Well, you want that one, so what are some ways that you're helping guys, even anyone deal with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's challenging, right? Because you're trying to balance, right? You always want to get better, right? And that's good. And I think in order to be the best, you have to always strive to be better. But I think that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier was you have to be your biggest critic and you also have to be your biggest fan. Like when you go 3 for 4 today, you should be the most hype person out of everybody, right? All the fans who are like, this guy's rocks, this guy's awesome. You have to be able to do that too. And because if you don't, then you're always going to be focusing on the negatives. You're going to get into this perfectionistic mindset where you're going to go 10 for 10 and not be happy. Right. And it's like, at what point are we okay? And like, no, I don't want you to be satisfied, but and I'm not talking about be the guy in the locker room screaming, running around with your shirt off, making a scene, but I'm talking at the end of the night, right? Routines, brushing your teeth, like looking yourself in the mirror and just being like, heck of a day today, like really good work today, and like, I'm proud of my work today. Could I be better? Always. We can always be better. But today was a freaking good day. And I think that's a lot harder than people think. And
it is.
It's funny because you have the guys who are like, the arrogant ones, which are few and far between, but sometimes that's all we see. And so, but majority of the guys are like, I can always be better. And so I challenge them, like, tell me something you did well today. Like, something you did well. And like some of them, it's like, I don't know. And I'm like, you're not leaving the room until you tell me something you did well today, because their mindset is so fixed on, I can always be better. And they can tell me 25 things that they need to work on for that day. And so I think that's why, even going back to like at dinner table, tell me one thing that went well today. And then maybe if you have somebody who's overly confident and always talking about tell me one thing you can improve on from the day. Right? It's like something so simple as that, but you have to know who the person is, and then you have to know how to balance that out, because if you don't find the positives, if you always find the negatives, you're going to freaking burn out. You're going to not last as long as you possibly could. Like even the best of the best are able to have a good time, right? And you don't enjoy it when you're mad, when you're constantly trying to be better, right? Like you got to enjoy it. And I think that's a big piece of it too. So it's pretty important. It's pretty important to be able to step back and be your own biggest fan. And I know people don't like to do that, but I'm probably going to say that till I die, but like you have to be your biggest fan and your biggest critic, no doubt.
That's awesome.
If you want to be the best.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you are on your way to being the best. That's for sure. You are. So I really appreciate your time. I love your passion. I love it. And
Thank you.
it's definitely energizing. And I really thank you for the time today, for sure.
You bet. Thanks for having me. It was
big thank you to Hannah Huesman, mental performance coach of the Philadelphia Phillies, for coming on today and having a great conversation filled with valuable things you can not only take onto the ball field, but you can take off of it. Things that if you continue to do, it will help you on the ball field. Things that will allow you to have more enjoyment of the game, more enjoyment with your life. I loved how she talked about the definition of her for being mental performance, or the definition of being mental tough, is about having the ability to turn your focus on and off and knowing which things to focus on. It's a big separator. And it's just as important to turn things off as it is to turn them on. I love how she talked about how she's trying to build relationships and build trust with her players because she needs to know that. But she also knows that you need to know yourself, spend time with yourself, knowing what works for you. Okay, and I love how she's giving all these examples, and we're trying to create awareness so people then can figure out, okay, what does work for me? She loves routines. There's reset routines. I love how she talks about reset routines and contingency plans. These are things that people have, I feel like they can visualize them even better too. When you have a reset routine, you're trying to reset each pitch. Okay, a contingency plan. You know the contingency, meaning that's what happens when things go wrong, as I know things are going to go wrong, and what's my plan for them. So, and it could be anything. Again, knowing yourself, knowing what works for you, and then you work your plan. Knowing that things has to be practiced outside. They have to be practiced outside of the game. They can't just be something we just talk about. We need to then, I loved how she got into the fact of how we as parents, how we can do things that will build our youth to then create them in the game. Such as when I don't allow people to bring cell phones or electronics to the table, we're focusing on the present moment. So that's going to help them in any other circumstance to be more present when they have to fulfill a task. And then when I have these routines when they wake up or when they go to bed, that then I'm helping them create better routines when they're on the free throw line, when they're at the plate, when they're getting ready to throw a pitch after pitch after pitch. They have a routine. Because those are the guys that don't get bothered by the pressure. Those are the people that continue to make each pitch what it is. It's a pitch. And don't allow it to get filled with them. And I love how she said, I know how you work so hard for that A. Now we're focusing on the process, not the outcome. What you did to create that good outcome. The outcomes are important. We need them. They're our focus. They are our guiding light, our North Star, so to speak. But the most important focus and where we put our daily attention is the process and how we're going to get to that outcome. So again, Hannah Huesman from the Philadelphia Phillies, mental performance coach, is a rock star, and I can't thank her enough. And please check her out on Twitter, Hannah_Huesman, or on Instagram at Hannah Huesman. So until next week, keep getting better. Thanks for listening.